Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of India International Center, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you to this important conversation on the book Beyond the Ballot, Paradoxes of Democracy by Sri T.S. Krishnamurthy. We are gathered today to reflect on some of the most pressing questions facing democracies across the world. Questions of institutional integrity, electoral processes, decentralization, and the subtle but profound influences that shape public life. This book provides a timely and incisive lens through which to examine these concerns, drawing on India's own constitutional wisdom and electoral experience. We are honored to have with us an eminent panel whose collective experience spans the highest offices of the judiciary, governance, public administration, and academia. It's an honor to welcome Justice M. Venkatachaliah, former Chief Justice of India. His contribution to India's judicial landscape, spanning his tenure as Chairman of the National Human Rights Commission and Head of the Constitution Review Commission, are defining markers of India's democratic evolution. A recipient of the Padma Vibhushan, he continues to inspire through his work on governance, ethics, and human rights. Welcome, Justice Venkatachaliah. We are pleased to have with us Justice Madan Lokur, former Judge of the Supreme Court of India and currently a Judge of the Supreme Court of Fiji, widely respected for his deep engagement with issues of juvenile justice, human rights, and institutional reform. He has served as Chief Justice of the Guwahati High Court and the Andhra Pradesh High Court. His judicial contributions and his leadership of juvenile justice committees have left a lasting impact on India's legal landscape. Welcome, Justice Lokur. We also welcome Professor Asha Sarangi, Professor at the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, a noted scholar trained at the University of Chicago. She has written extensively on language politics, identity, nationalism, and state formation in modern India. Her academic engagements across prestigious global institutions and her leadership in research collaborations have made her a leading voice in contemporary political studies. Welcome, Professor Sarangi. We are privileged to be joined by Sri T.S. Krishnamurthy, former Chief Election Commissioner of India and the author of today's book. A member of the Indian Revenue Service, his illustrious career includes serving as IMF advisor to the governments of Ethiopia and Georgia. As election commissioner and later chief election commissioner, he oversaw the 2004 general elections and introduced electronic voting machines nationwide. His writings, including The Miracle of Democracy, offer invaluable insights into India's electoral journey and the challenges before global democracies. Welcome, Sri Krishna Murthy. Our moderator this evening, Sri Suhas Borker, is a distinguished media professional and documentary filmmaker. As founder of Citizens First TV, CFTV, he has been a consistent advocate for public service broadcasting and civic engagement. His work with civil society initiatives, such as the Working Group on Alternative Strategies and the Green Circle of Delhi, reflects his lifelong commitment to inclusive development and responsible governance. Welcome, Sri Borker. Together, this distinguished panel brings unmatched breadth and depth to our conversation today. Beyond the Belt examines the functioning of democracies in our time, their strengths, vulnerabilities, and dilemmas. It offers a nuanced understanding of electoral banishment, political party regulation, foreign interference, and the growing influence of decentralized and voluntary agencies. Most importantly, it suggests pathways to revitalize democratic institutions, particularly in smaller or fragile democracies, and reflects on India's potential role as a guiding democratic example. We look forward to an evening of rich reflection, critical inquiry, and thoughtful engagement. Thank you for joining us. It's my privilege to invite Sri Suhas Borker to take the session forward. Over to you, Mr. Borker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Munshi. And welcome to all of you on this, with the doldrums of pollution in Delhi, we're still gathered here. Thank you very much. So I see this book, Beyond the Ballot, Paradoxes of Democracy and Ideal and Indian Perspective, as a continuum of Sri Krishna Murthy's earlier book, The Miracles of Democracy, India's Amazing Journey, published in 2008. Article 324 of the Constitution is about a critical institution, the guardian of our democratic structure, which protects the foundation of our democracy and democratic functioning of our nation. And it should never, I repeat, it should never reflect an approach to governance that treats a national institution like a private fiefdom, which diminishes the dignity of our constitutional institutions and sends a troubling message about how governments can subvert the very idea of democracy and democratic functioning. We are very grateful that esteemed Justice M.N. Venkatachaliah has joined us from Bangalore. So I would invite him to take the floor. Sir. Sir, the floor is yours, sir. Justice Venkatachaliah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Justice Madan Lokur, Asha Sarangi, Shri Suhas Borker, Shri T.S. Krishna Murthy, and all the esteemed distinguished invitees. Justice, it is said, is the greatest interest of man on the earth. But what is justice in a given context is the invitation to some of the most complicated intellectual controversies of our times. Similarly, the word democracy has generated so much of intellectual excitement and political promise. All the world confirms that democracy to be the most perfect work of political wisdom, and the principle of equality is the pivot on which the grand machine turns. One person, one vote shatters the hierarchies of caste, class, wealth in the ideological sense. But citizens crippled by poverty, illiteracy, fear, and social oppression, the reality is certainly different. A writer commented that democracy in its present form cannot survive the merger of biotech and infotech. Political imagination is not always held by accuracy of information, but rather by fictional versions and stories and emotive stimuli. Harari, in his book Nexus, observes that when it comes to uniting people, fiction enjoys two inherent advantages over the truth. First, fiction can be made as simple as we like, whereas the truth tends to be complicated. The author makes another arresting observation. The truth is often painful and disturbing, and if we try to make it more comforting and flattering, it will no longer be the truth. In contrast, fiction is highly malleable. Political response to these challenges follows a familiar template. It glosses over lines of cleavages and provides the apparent comfort of the vision of better days. In Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, there is an embedded story. The Grand Inquisitor argues that most people are too weak to live. The Grand Inquisitor argues that most people are too weak to live by free will and spiritual truth, and therefore need to be fed bread. That means basic security and comfort, a means of placating or pacifying people. Francis Fukuyama's optimism on the self-evident, inherent, universal consensus on the worth and merit of democracy does not hold any longer any assurance. Sri Krishnamurthy's message quite timely, and Krishnamurthy's message is quite timely. but one hopes the democratic vitality that India's great masses have shown in response to some critical challenges in the past might hold out some promise. Then again, the basic and fundamental tensions continue to defy answers. Is constitutional morality a natural sentiment? How far should moral will of the mere majority be allowed to shape the law? Again, I'll ask, how far the moral will of the mere majority be allowed to shape the law? What is the ultimate dilemma between majoritarian morality and constitutional morality? Democracy is as much a sublime theory as it is a practical phenomenon. It is the message of a nation's political and civilizational maturity. Sri Krishna Murthy deserves our thanks for coming out of the comfort of his retirement and present to us some of the perplexing problems of our time. Eternal religion, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, as they say. I thank you for your kind invitation. I am here to convey to Mr. Krishnamurthy how grateful we are to him for the trouble that he has taken to present some of the pressing problems of our democracy today before us. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Venkatachaliah, for your observations, and thank you for joining us from Bangalore. Thank you. Baba Saheb Ambedkar expressed his apprehension in the Constituent Assembly on June 16th, 1949, during the debates on the draft Article 289, now Article 324 of the Constitution dealing with the Election Commission. He had said then that in the absence of any provision in the Constitution to prevent the executive of the day to appoint either a fool or a knave as the Election Commissioner, it would be likely that the Election Commission of India would come under the thumb of the executive. I would like, without further ado, to request Sri Krishna Murthy, who never came under the thumb of the executive. Please.
I say very good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for responding to the invitation for this book discussion. This particular book was launched in Chennai by Mr. Justice Ramasubramaniam, Chairman of the new National Human Rights Commission, in sometime end of August. But then my friends suggested that I should have a discussion in India Trans Center in Delhi, and that's particularly Mr. Suhas Borker took the initiative to organize this. I'm grateful to him for organizing this book decision. The main purpose of this book is to convey a kind of a message about the future of democracy. Actually, democracy has been very intellectually stimulating and emotionally very captivating, but in actual implementation, you can definitely say there is no perfect democracy at all anywhere in the world. And I have had a look at the development of democracies all over the world, and I thought, instead of going into a particular situation, because my first book was mostly on the functioning of the Indian democracy and the Indian election management. So the second book, I thought I'll take it at the macro level to see whether, with the Indian experience, some of the deficiencies in the electoral systems all over the world could have some kind of an impact, some kind of an improvement. And with that intention, I wrote this book. The purpose of this book may not be thought-provoking. However, it is meant to be thought-inducing. It narrates the evolution of democracy, its current challenges, and its future opportunities. The original title of the book was Global Democracies, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But a well-meaning friend suggested this change of the title, more positive outlook, and hence I adopted this title. Democracy has been subject to discussions, variety of discussions, debates, and writings. Unfortunately, democracy has been like the elephant and the six blind men. People have been looking at democracy with their own personal experiences, and they have their own perspective. As Mr. Justice Venkatachaliah has written in his foreword, democracy to human society is what oxygen is to human life, its survival and progress. However, our politicians and political parties have more often than not polluted the environment, making democracy looking ugly and sometimes repulsive. I will not take much of the time, but I'll just briefly mention what I have tried to convey in this book. Earliest governments emerged 5,000 years ago when the human race was struggling to chart a course between violence of anarchy and the violence of tyranny. These governments survived in the short run. Over time, these governments faced mass uprisings and murders among different groups. Democracy looked an attractive alternative over a period. In 1989, Francis Fukuyama, a political scientist, noted that democracy represented the end of the history. He thought democracy was the most perfect form of government. Unfortunately, the optimism was not prophetic. And then go to, we are living in a testing and trying times for democracy. The deterioration in quality of democratic governance has been tragically pronounced internationally in political corruption, credible elections, press freedom, media neutrality, luxurious profligacy in unproductive public expenditure, reckless promotion of hatred, violence, and crimes by political parties, international frictions, etc. There is a growing dissatisfaction with democratic systems and demand for alternative political system to meet the aspirations of the people. The Nobel Peace Laureate, Mr. Rigobert Tatum, beautifully sums up the essential value of democracy. Peace cannot exist without justice. Justice cannot exist without fairness. Fairness cannot exist without development. Development cannot exist without democracy. And democracy cannot exist without respect for identity and worth of cultures and peoples. Handled properly, with maturity, skill, and dexterity, democracy can survive and succeed. The stakeholders, political parties, media, constitutional institutions such as parliament, judiciary, election management body, public audit authority, must discharge their responsibilities in responsible, sensitive, and accountable manner. Democracy was ushered in human history with noble objectives. Unfortunately, it has become the future of democracy is fragile and it's prone for its failures. In fact, I went through recently a correspondence on the views of democracy by Mr. Thomas Macaulay. Normally, you associate with him the British democratic tradition and so on. But he says democracy is most ineffective form of government. And a pure democracy can never exist. So it has to be some controlled or guided by either aristocracy or monarchy. Very strange observations from him. But be that as it may, there is an urgent need to have a look at the future of democracy. We have to take remedial action. If you are going to allow the normal kind of democracy to happen, only mediocrity will run democracy. And mediocrity will ensure the collapse of democracy. That's an unfortunate feature. So if a democracy has to survive, it has to provide opportunities for merit to play, an enlightened leadership to come. At the same time, ensure that the poverty and illiteracy of the people need to be addressed. But unfortunately, as you know, particularly in Afro-Asian countries, the leadership has not been enlightened. In many countries, it is very often dancing to the tunes and passions of the mobocracy, with the result that democracy is really not in a position to survive for long. In fact, I have conveyed my anguish as to the future of democracy if the present trend continues. It needs to be addressed, and if it cannot be addressed, I'm sure there is a very unfortunate consequence. I'll just complete my presentation saying that India can play a role, not that India is perfect in its democracy, but it can take timely and positive remedial action. It can be a guiding light for many aspiring democracies. For example, in India, we have a representative democracy where only people with 25% of the votes polled become representative of the whole constituency. This is a distorted democracy. It is not a democracy which can really, represent the people. So, in my opinion, some of the changes are urgently required in India if democracy has to survive, and it can provide certain leadership qualities, at least for the aspiring democratic countries. So, I'll conclude saying with the words of Bernard Levin of the Times London, which I have quoted in the book. Remember this: if the democracy of India fails, the end of democracy itself will be in sight. But we who live in democracies must keep the flame alight, however dark the surrounding world. So, with these words, I present my book, and I sincerely hope that the book can provide some kind of a enlightening vision to the future of democracy. But all that I would again reiterate before I conclude is, unless you have enlightened people to lead democracies, democracies are bound to fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri Krishna Murthy. As I mentioned at the beginning, this book, Beyond the Ballot, is a continuum of the miracle of democracy, which Sri Krishnamurthy wrote in 2008. Now, I take you to a brief passage from that earlier book where Sri Krishnamurthy is talking of proceedings before the Shah Commission, which he now elaborates, which was set up after the emergency to look into excesses by the administration during that time. The report of the Shah Commission mentioned on many occasions that civil servants were willing to crawl when they were only required to bend during the emergency rule. It is this attitude, he goes on to say, which has substantially contributed to the deteriorating standards in governance and is threatening the future of democracy in India. Even though most politicians are keen to derive personal capital from the issues before them, a powerful civil servant who is determined to remain neutral can keep such individuals under check. Now, that's what Sri Krishnamurthy did. Unfortunately, in recent years, the standards have come down substantially, both at the middle and higher levels of the civil service, more so in the state governments. This has resulted in politicians often making use of civil servants to realize their own undemocratic ends. So this is 2008, and we are in now 2025. Over to Justice Lokur.
Yeah, thank you, Suhas. Mr. Krishnamurthy and friends. First of all, let me say that Mr. Krishnamurthy has done an excellent job in giving us this collection of essays on elections and, in a sense, on democracy and the functioning of democracy. I've gone through all those essays, and I find that it's thought-inducing, as you say, but also thought-provoking, because some of the issues that he has dealt with are issues that we are facing even today. The book was released, like he said, in August, but the issues are really contemporary issues and therefore thought-provoking and thought-inducing. Now, the book begins with the first chapter, the first essay on the rule of law. And I would like to go back 50 years before discussing the other aspects of the book. 50 years ago, the Supreme Court, in a judgment of 13 judges, laid down the principle that we have our constitution has a basic structure. So while the constitution can be amended, the basic structure of the constitution cannot be amended. The amending power given under the constitution does not go to the extent of amending the basic structure. And that really is the basis of the rule of law that we are living in today. Rule of law is also a part of the basic structure as held by the Supreme Court in subsequent judgments. But the first test of the rule of law and the basic structure came when the 38th Amendment was promulgated by Parliament to nullify the judgment of the Allahabad High Court that held that Mrs. Gandhi had indulged in corrupt practices and therefore her election was vitiated. Sorry. Now, interestingly, the decision was by 5 judges of the Supreme Court, and 3 of them, perhaps 4, I'm not very sure, but certainly 3 of them were judgments who were in the minority in the Keshwaranand Bharati case. In other words, they had not accepted the view that was propounded that the Constitution has a basic structure. But, and this is important, what does the rule of law say? So these 3 judges had a few options before them. One was to say that, well, we had expressed the view that there is nothing like the basic structure of the Constitution. So therefore, Keshwaranand Bharati's judgment deserves to be reconsidered. That is one view that was available to them. The other view that was available to them was to say that, well, we had taken a particular view when we decided Keshwaranand Bharati's case. But over the last 2 years or so, we have become wiser and we have changed our opinion, and we think that, yes, there is a basic structure in the Constitution. The third option available to them was under the rule of law, that this is the law that has been laid down by the Supreme Court, and while we may disagree, we have to follow the rule of law. And they took that option. And they said that, well, we are bound by the decision in Keshwaranand Bharati. There is a rule of law. There is the basic structure which cannot be changed. And importantly, for our discussion today, free and fair elections is a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. That's when there was this recognition that free and fair elections are absolutely necessary. They form a part of the basic structure, and if you somehow or the other manipulate the elections so that they're not free or they're not fair, then you're violating the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, with this somewhat long introduction, I would like to mention that one of the issues that has been mentioned by Mr. Krishna Murthy in his book is about the delays in the law. Now, election petitions, once an election is held and a candidate is aggrieved, the candidate has, the losing candidate, has the right to file an election petition within a period of 45 days. And the election petition should be preferably decided within a period of 6 months. Now, a senior advocate from Chennai, Mr. Raja, had done some work about the elections in 2009. And he said, there was an article that he wrote which was published in the Hindu, which said that 110 election petitions have been filed after the 2009 elections. Not one was decided within 6 months. And after the 2014 5-year term of the candidates, 25 election petitions were still pending, which means that those persons may have been guilty of corrupt practices, but the law's delays, made their petitions completely infructuous. And this ADR, Association of Democratic Rights, has also mentioned that the number of election petitions increased sometime in after the elections of 2019, but I don't know how many of them were decided, within the 5-year period of the elections, and how many. I'm sure none of them were decided within 6 months. So these are the law's delays which Mr. Krishna Murthy highlights in his first essay. On the other hand, you also have an instance where the courts take a decision very quickly. You will all remember the Chandigarh elections, mayoral elections, where the person who was the election officer was looking at the CCTV camera and fudging the votes, and the case was decided within a few weeks. So you have these swings between delays and immediate decision. Now, Mr. Krishnamurthy's essays, and he has mentioned it in one of them, consists of on elections, consists of 4 parts. One is transparency. The second is accountability. The third is integrity. And the fourth is responsiveness. So I'd just like to say a few words about each one of these categories that he has referred to. On the issue of transparency, there is a discussion on muscle and money power. We were used to it in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, but in spite of the fact that EVMs were introduced by Mr. Krishnamurthy when he was Chief Election Commissioner in 2004, muscle and money power continues. Now, how is that? The muscle power is there because of the large number of criminal cases that are filed against politicians and which are pending. The Supreme Court had said maybe about 2 years ago that there should be fast-track courts to decide criminal cases against politicians. Some of them may be just frivolous cases, but some of them may be serious. But nothing has actually come out of it. And ADR again mentions that something like 20% or 1/5 of the elected members have criminal cases against them. What about money power? The electoral bonds, I think, were a perfect example of money power, where thousands of crores, literally thousands of crores were given to political parties, which were used in elections. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court took its own time to decide the case, and after 4 years and maybe about 10 or 15 elections, including state elections, the Supreme Court said that the electoral bonds scheme was unconstitutional, but the damage had been done because of those thousands of crores that were given. Violations of the Model Code of Conduct, again an issue highlighted by Mr. Krishnamurthy. Now, there are instances, where there is violations galore, no action is taken. Petitions are filed with the Election Commission to say that you take some action, but the Election Commission says yes, we'll take action. In due course, we'll take action. And at the end of the day, they take some minor action. Mr. Krishnamurthy suggests that more power should be given to the Election Commission, including fining the political parties. Well, if the power that is available is not being utilized, giving them more power can actually, sometimes prove detrimental. So I'm not sure, sir, with respect, Whether that's a suggestion that should be discussed, but yeah, we can debate it and see where to find a middle path in this. We've had something called Namo TV, which was introduced in the 2019 elections, general elections. What happened? There were complaints. Nothing happened, right? So there is so much talk about freebies or reverie, whatever you may wish to call it. Thousands of crores. We saw recently in the Bihar elections, I think something like almost 1 lakh crore projects were, announced, which will be implemented hopefully in the next 5 years. Where does the government get this money from? When we talk about transparency in the election process, where is this money coming from? And where is it going eventually? You have read recently in the newspapers about chief minister of a particular state giving contracts, something like 1,400 contracts to members of his family. So, these are problems of transparency, which I think we must look into. The second area which Mr. Krishna Murthy has talked about is accountability. Now, accountability not only in the election process, but also in the appointment of election commissioners. Now, Dr. Ambedkar was pretty clear that he did not want the executive to control the election commission. How else can you have free and fair elections? Now, in spite of what Dr. Ambedkar believes, we did have the executive who was appointed by the government, but fortunately we were lucky that, we had good election commissioners, which is again something which Dr. Ambedkar had spoken about and Dr. Rajendra Prasad had also spoken about. But now, with this politicization, so to speak, of the appointment of election commissioners, the Supreme Court said that, why don't you have the Chief Justice of India as one of the members who will be in the selection committee? A perfectly reasonable, proposal in line with the thoughts of Dr. Ambedkar. But what do we have? The Constitution says a law must be passed for the appointment. So a law was passed. And the law was passed excluding the Chief Justice of India and introducing in his place a member of the cabinet. So that at any point of time, the executive has control over the appointments. Removal. The Chief Election Commissioner has the power to suggest the removal of an election commissioner. So if an election commissioner disagrees, as it happened in the case of Mr. Lavasa, rather than be told by the Chief Election Commissioner that, you please leave, Mr. Lavasa thought it better to, resign and, go elsewhere. So these are issues of accountability that, which are current and which have been raised by Mr. Krishna Murthy. Also on account of, the anti-defection law, after the electoral process is over, you elect a particular person and then he switches over, goes to some other party. What do you do about it? You can file a petition before the speaker, but if the speaker decides, I'm not going to decide this case, what happens? Right? So we've had instances in Manipur where the speaker said, I'll decide it in good time. The Constitution doesn't say I have to decide it within a fixed period of time, so I'll decide it when I feel like it. The matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, well, if no time is prescribed, and this is the law for the last, I don't know how many years, it means a reasonable time. And we think 3 months is reasonable for you to decide because this matter has been pending with you for months. He doesn't decide in 3 months. And again, the Supreme Court is approached. And short of taking contempt action, they direct the speaker to take a decision and then he takes a decision. The same problem arose in Maharashtra. where the speaker said, I'll decide. The matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said by the end of the year, nothing happened. So these are issues, which Mr. Krishnamurthy has raised on not only the electoral process, but what happens after the electoral process. Within the electoral process, you have phases. All right, who decides the phases? The Election Commission. And how many phases? Now, in West Bengal, for example, they had 7 phases at one point of time. That's one aspect. And on the other hand, we talk about one nation, one election, where we have the general election and assembly elections all at once. How many phases will it take? Will it be done in one phase, or will it be done in 20 phases? So what are we looking at, The third, sorry, I'm taking a little bit of time.
Go ahead.
The third issue that Mr. Krishnamurthy raises is one of integrity. Now, there is this thing about, ballot papers. There are problems with ballot papers in the sense that, you have to print them. There's a huge amount of wastage of paper and so on. That is one of the reasons why the electronic voting machine EVM was introduced. There has been an improvement in that by the introduction of the VVPAT. The matter had come up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, you don't have to check every constituency. You take random 5% and see how it works. Now, again, there are disputes, whether the EVMs have been hacked or they have not been hacked, whether when you press the button for a particular candidate, it's only your vote for that particular candidate gets recorded. I don't know, this debate will perhaps continue for a long time. There are votaries of EVMs, which were introduced, by the way, by Mr. Krishnamurthy in 2004. And there are votaries of paper ballots. There are votaries of VVPATs. So you have, 3 issues. Now, so far as EVMs are concerned, the integrity of the machine is important. However, now, with the technology being what it is, artificial intelligence being what it is, whether, some artificial intelligence or some fantastic software can hack those machines is another question altogether. But I think the Supreme Court has accepted the fact that the integrity of the machine itself is okay. But what can happen to the machine, really one can't say, because it depends upon the hackers. Mr. Krishnamurthy has also talked about first past the post and proportional representation. You had mentioned that a person with only 25% of the votes, can represent the whole constituency. But proportional representation will require, a lot of expenditure. There are 2 articles, one which had come after the 2019 elections, which said that the election process costs 50,000 crores of rupees. 2024 was about 1 lakh crore. So when you have proportional representation, which may be a good idea, I'm not saying it's not a good idea, you have to look at the expense. But if you look at the expense and compare it with, the freebies, perhaps 1 lakh crore or 50,000 crore is not much. So, but this is something which, needs to be discussed. Do we change our system? We continue with free and fair elections, undoubtedly, but do we change the system from first past the post to something like proportional representation? SIR, vote chori, again, these are issues that are being discussed right now, as we meet over here. But again, to what extent do they impinge upon the integrity of the electoral process? These are questions which I think need to be debated and discussed. Finally, responsiveness. Now, one responsiveness thought was about the one nation, one election. That our representatives are answerable to the people, so that we don't have elections coming one after the other. You do a good job, you win the next election, which may be a state election. You don't do a good job, and you're unlikely to lose. You're unlikely to win the next state election. There are issues of federalism when you have one nation, one election. Will issues pertaining to the country, the central government, will that have an impact? What about state issues? We have another expert with us, Mr. Qureshi. I was just on the question of some of the issues that need to be discussed and which have been raised by Mr. Krishna Murthy. Delays, I have already mentioned. Is our system responsive? When there's a corrupt practice, can it be decided quickly? Or do we have to wait until the next election to say that in the previous election, this person had indulged in a corrupt practice? So these are, all issues which are directly connected. The Supreme Court, in the case of Mahinder Singh Gill, has given, supreme power to the Election Commission, in the sense that no interference. The courts don't interfere once the election process starts. But start from the beginning, with the appointment of the election commissioners, see what is happening in the electoral process. Is that being conducted in a free and fair manner? Free and fair elections? And then what happens after that, right? So these are all issues that Mr. Krishnamurthy has raised. Some of them, like I said, there could be another point of view, but they all need to be discussed and debated. And I would certainly thank Mr. Krishnamurthy for raising these questions. It's not about what has happened 20 years ago, what has happened 30 years ago. It is something about what is happening today, right? So we have to be prepared for that discussion, or as Mr. Krishnamurthy says, democracy is going to be in a peril. Is going to be in peril. So thank you very much, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Justice Madan Lokur, for that presentation. So these are the days of acronyms. So when he was talking of transparency, accountability, integrity, and responsiveness, it comes out a tire. So, but the powers that put up acronyms will not pick this up. Anyway, that's another story. I just want to highlight, before I ask Professor Sarangi to come in, there's a chapter on chapter 11 on hatred and violence in election campaigns. Now, this Madan here, and we have been working on this for the hate speech. We've been working at IIC on this for the past 2 years. And we are, in fact, on the 13th of December, we are going to make a presentation at IIC. And Justice Lokur has written a paper also on this. This is part of the sectoral policy group on social affairs, of which I am the convener. And the first topic we took up was hate speech. So here, Sri Krishnamurthy highlights a point which I think is very important. He says that one possible remedy is to statutorily empower the Election Commission to punish offenders instantly through monetary penalties or disqualification, with the right to appeal against such decisions to the high courts after the completion of elections. Now,
these are the marks you need.
It's a reform which will hit hard, on the powers that be. So over to you, Professor Sarangi.
Thank you, Professor Mr. Booker, for inviting me, and also to IIC. And of course, to the author, many congratulations for writing this book. Being the last speaker, I have the advantage of not saying many things which already Justice Lokur has said, but I did enjoy reading your book and I read it page by page. So I have lots to say, but I don't know how much time Mr. Booker is going to give me. I think the book, and much has already been said by the other panelists, is very lucidly written, very easy to read. And I must say, since it is written by somebody who has spent decades of uh, his whole life in the public service, it has the kind of not just the factual information, I would say, which is of course in the book, but written with a certain degree of empathy, a certain degree of livedness of those experiences, which is different from the academic works that one reads. So the book has both um, norms and facts very clearly and interestingly woven into each other. And I would say it actually touches upon, as Justice Lokur just told us, on so many issues that won't be fair to discuss it in such a brief time, but let me see if I can do some justice to it. So it's not an usual academic book, I would say, which is normally about citing a lot of other authors with full of references. So it was therefore also very delightful a read that one did not have to go through sometimes that kind of a reading. It's a book which is based on your own reflections, but reflections which come with huge degree of experiences, which I think is a nice combination, and I would urge people to read this book. So any book on politics talks about state, talks about democracy, talks about the idea of rule, governance, so on and so forth. Um, and therefore, the idea of democracy, whether it is in India or globally, through so many examples that you have cited, is a story about the success and the failure of the state as well. So, what does this book tell us? I think I would come straight away into that. Some of the pertinent questions which I think you're trying to raise in the book is not just about the normative, conceptual, theoretical understanding of the idea of democracy in India. Much has been written. I don't think that was needed. But I think how do we really look at the interface between the normative understanding of it and the practical, experiential understanding of it? So it's a way in which both norms and facts come together in this book. So therefore, this book is not just relevant for our time, but I think it is also going to be relevant for the future, for the posterity. And the second question, which I would like to raise at the very beginning, would be if democracy is about the if the idea of democracy is to be seen in terms of liberal democracy that we generally talk about through the Western context, then to what extent the idea of representative democracy that we have through, elections or parliament and state assemblies and so on and so forth, the idea of representation is truly about manifesting the idea of liberal democracy. What I mean to say is, do the two concepts of liberal democracy and representative democracy are in total consonance, or are there conflictual spaces between the two? And I think the book does not really talk about it in this manner, but if you read it closely and carefully, you can see the gaps existing between these two normative aspects of democracy. So in some way, it is important to look at the historical account which the book gives us, but it's also important how democracy in India has been or has not been actualized. And people, of course, these days talk about it whether the democracy is dying, or democracy is being killed, or democracy is surviving or not surviving. But the question is, to what extent the institutional mechanism, and in this case, of course, the role of the Election Commission, and you yourself being Chief Election Commissioner of this country, has remained important. The entire institutional matrix, not simply the Election Commission, I would say, but other institutions which are equally important to sustain the idea of democracy or the survival of democracy in any country, but more so in our country, because it is so very complex and diverse and different from many other countries of the world. So, can one say that democracy causes or is caused by issues of governance? Because there is a great deal of discussion about the idea of governance, and I think Justice Lokur has very nicely summarized the book, the 14, 15 chapters, the short chapters that consist in this book. So the pertinent question is, if we are talking about the idea of democratization, which is central to the notion of democracy in a very, very simplistic sense, are we also, and I think Krishna Murthy ji says it very, very clearly and very robustly and strongly and honestly, that we must also look at the possibilities and processes of decentralization of democracy, which, in other words, decentralized democratization as a process, which is, I think, more meaningful in his ideas. And he gives the example of what quote unquote called smart villages. And so I was very happy to read that he's not talking about smart cities or smart districts, but actually smart villages, very Gandhian in understanding. So the author also cautions us and suggests that there is no one or easy solution to all shortcomings or threats to the life and times of democracy in India per se, but anywhere in the world. And I think that's the message that comes out very strongly in the book in different chapters, because both the success and failure are part of democracy. I think we sometimes have been fed on this narrative that democracy going to solve all the problem. But I think it is time that we accept that, like any other form of government, democracy as a form of government is also full of shortcomings. Then only possibly we can have certain solutions for correcting it. So there is a lot in the book in terms of the facts about Indian democracy. And as Justice Lokur was telling us, the whole idea of election petitions, and Krishnamurti sir actually gives the number of 1129 election petitions which have been filed in High Court since the first elections. So one can imagine the number of cases that are still lying unresolved. There is also the idea of absence of self-regulating processes over political parties. And I think the book clearly tells us in different ways how political parties, or if I could bring in the another notion of the political economy of corruption that actually has entered our system. So that's another very interesting chapter in the book. The relationship or close relationship between good governance and representative democracy is another thrust of the book. I think, therefore, the terms that are these days used about competitive populism or democratic autocracy or democratic backsliding, these are the terms which in some way tell us what are the threats to the existing democracy or democratic functioning of democracy. And I really liked the quote that you have used in the book, and I would like to just read it out, where you say, I don't remember the name of the author whom you have quoted, but the quotation is, sometimes democratic politics turns almost wild. I think you have quoted this, which is to say, one must be not shy of accepting the fact that democracy can go wild. And I think there are enormous examples before us to suggest this happening right now. So the book has 14 short chapters covering a vast canvas, issues like rule of law, um, but he also suggests, and I found that very interesting, that we need to distinguish or make a difference between rule of law and the rule of law. So I think that was quite interesting. I mean, if you read the book, you will understand what the author is trying to say. The idea of judicial delays and failure, so we know it, justice delayed is justice denied. The question of human rights violation, and another very interesting statement, because I think when you have served in the government as a bureaucrat, you are also sometimes using certain expressions which are very direct, which actually communicate the message much more effectively than the academics writing the entire book on it. So another statement which really caught my attention was lawyers paradise where legal practitioners thrive at the expense of the litigation. So I thought that summed up the corruption that has entered our system. Non-disposal of cases related to election petitions is another very important chapter in the book. And therefore, the suggestion is that we should probably think of setting up an all India judicial service which should recruit the judicial officers. I think that's one of the suggestions that you have given in this book, to avoid the politicization of the judicial appointment. And of course, the heart of the matter is about political parties in the book and what kind of challenges that exist before us, the role of money, the role of power, muscle power, buying legislators to form the government, so on and so forth. And the fact remaining that number of political parties now being 2,500. I didn't know this earlier, so it's quite stunning. But not all political parties participate in elections. Only, as we know, 7 of them are recognized as political parties, national political parties, and about 50 state political parties. So there is a lot of meaty stuff in the book, which actually is quite enjoyable to read. Idea about corporate funding. Justice Lokur has already talked at great length about it. And role of dynastic politics, I thought, which we must not hesitate to talk about, but you use the word progeny, not dynasty. And I wonder why did you use that word progeny? Um, and so there is also a chapter, very short one, on the relationship between federalism and democracy, and conducting elections as a smooth exercise, whether possible or not, the idea of vote share and seat share, and so on and so forth. I'm just going through very quickly because I don't think I have much time. Criminalization of politics, first past the post system, proportional representation, and so on and so forth. And EVM, because you yourself were so very part of the EVM, and therefore there is a certain way in which you are supportive of EVM, even though one keeps hearing about different kinds of issues, as Justice Lokur has already highlighted. One is little suspicious about EVMs also. One nation, one election, simultaneous election. I think much discussion has taken place. Therefore, instead of having one nation, one election in 29, we think the government has already postponed it to 2034. And of course, the issue of hatred, speech is very important. Hatred and violence, certain kind of use of abusive language that has come to stay during the campaigns before and after the elections. And of course, voter registration, SIR. And I'm sure you could not write about SIR because your book is published before SIR exercise began in Bihar. And of course, now we cannot avoid talking about SIR. So I would like to ask you if you have your thoughts to share with us on SIR, and why are we linking up the idea of citizen, voter identity with CAA, citizenship. So having said this as a brief summary of the book, let me just raise few issues for further discussion and maybe some clarification from Mr. Krishna Murthy. Uh, Twice or thrice in the book, you have used the expression violence of anarchy, and violence of tyranny. I couldn't really distinguish the two. I mean, is there really difference between the two, or are you sort of suggesting they are the same? That's one. Second, I think a very important notion you have given is that is democratic combativeness. You have used this word, where you are saying that we must be very serious about certain policies and values of retaining democracy's foundations. So, in my view, this idea of democratic combativeness is not simply in terms of actually fighting for elections, but also in terms of living with the idea of democracy on an everyday basis. So, something that French scholar Ernest Renan said, the idea of plebiscite, that there should be everyday testing of the government in power. How does one think about this idea of sort of plebiscite, daily plebiscite? And third, in my view, I think instead of making election commission, I think this has been said particularly during and after the Bihar elections, we should be moving towards citizen-centric election commission, not election commission-centric citizens. In the sense, the citizens' voter rights must be taken care of by the election commission, not that the election commission should be taken care of by the citizens. I think much has been said, but I just wanted to bring it. A fourth point is the discursive power of democracy, the argumentative power of the democracy in a society like ours, which is so multilingual, so multicultural, where people have different notions of democracy, not simply in terms of electoral democracy, not simply in terms of the elections, but what does discursive power of democracy enable us to do? Because we see the role of narratives a lot these days, particularly during the time of elections. So, how do we look at the role of narratives, both by the ruling regime as well as by the opposition, which have entered actually the electoral battle in a big way? So, we must take care of the idea of narrative. We must also think about several other constitutional bodies, several other democratic institutions which have been set up since the beginning. And do they all collaborate, or is it only the election commission which has become the most sovereign body for conducting elections and ensuring the fair and free elections? I think without a robust civil society and its sustenance by the state itself, it's very difficult to talk about democratic state functioning. So, where is civil society? I think some reflection has to be given to that. And last but not the least, I would say we have believed that democracy is probably the best form of government or best form of rule. But like all other forms of government, democratic forms of government can also be unstable, can also be violence prone. And therefore, we need to keep in mind the fear. We need to keep in mind this challenge that may come before us. I think Justice Lokur already said it towards the end of his presentation. So we need to keep in mind both its fragility and sustainability, that both things can happen. Also, the question of mistrust that has come. Why does the state not trust its citizens? There is an increasing degree of mistrust about the people's participation in the government functioning on day-to-day basis, and about the civic public participation. Even if you are participating in a peaceful march, there is a fear that the state has from the people. So I think we are we have seen how the freedom of expression has been suppressed, how the institutional decline has happened, how some kind of authoritarian regime has come to stay, not just in India, but in many other countries around the world. So, are we moving, in the name of democracy, are we moving to some kind of electoral autocracy or electoral anarchy? I think we need to pay attention to that. And one need to bring, therefore, democracy back in, as one has talked about bringing the state back in. After the withdrawal of the state, we also want the state to come back as one of the institutions to provide us welfareism. Similarly, we cannot but think of bringing the democracy back in the form of not simply majoritarianism, but more in terms of the people's democracy, people's voices. And I think the subversion of democracy is happening worldwide, and therefore India is also part of. I mean, India is in it. This subversion of democracy is not happening only by certain sections or certain people, but by the state itself. So where do we go when the institution which is supposed to provide you safety and freedom is actually undermining those very virtues? So is the electoral form of democracy the only answer, or are there other forms of democracy maybe one can hope for? Thank you and congratulations again for writing such a good book for us to read.
Yeah, thank you very much for that walk through the book, very nicely conducted. Thank you. Now, you mentioned about there's a chapter on vote registration, and then I just wanted to, from where you can start picking up questions. He mentions Shri Krishna Murthy does specifically mention that some complaints, now this is before the present issues came up, some complaints relating to deletion of names from the register, even though these voters has exercised their right to vote in previous elections based on the then current voting register. Although clear instructions exist regarding the deletion of names, it appears that in many cases names have been deleted without following the prescribed procedure. This is one area where the election authority probably needs to focus. So that's there. Now we'll open it to the Q&A session. So yeah. So then Shri Krishna Murthy will also pick up the raise by both of you. That can, yeah. Anybody from this side? Yeah, please. Yeah, Hardayal Singh. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, in your book you've mentioned, and I think we've discussed it earlier, that there are delays by the judiciary in disposing of election petitions. So one suggestion you have given is that why can't the power of adjudicating election disputes be given to the Election Commission itself? After all, it's meant to be an umpire. It's performed its role credibly on the whole since 1947, if you look at it, if you look at the fate of other democracies all over the world. And in fact, a lot of Westerners have said that Indian democracy is actually a public good. And it is actually exemplary in many ways, because even if you compare it with the American system, our counting takes place on that very day. Theirs sometimes takes weeks. So why can't the Election Commission itself be entrusted with the power of adjudicating disputes? They can take a retired Supreme Court judge or an eminent jurist as part of the commission setup and dispose of petitions expeditiously. Would you like to react to that, sir?
Two more, and then, yeah, go ahead. Just identify yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Ganesh Gaigoria and pursuing PhD at the Center for Political Studies, JNU. Thank you for this timely book first of all. But my apologies that I have not read your book, but after listening to the conversations, I have something in my mind to ask. So during the general elections of 2024, I was part of some project where we did, the title of the project was The Cost of Democracy. So I participated with the voters and politicians 30 days, I mean, day, night. So I got something during the field when we are talking about this constitutional morality and what the constitutional sovereignty versus the popular sovereignty. That's something coming into my mind. When you are talking about the money and muscle power, at the ground also, people's, when they are participating in the election rallies and during the last day of, what we call the Qatal Ki Raat, the day before the election, the politicians, goons were distributing money for getting the votes. So during my conversations with peoples, I asked them, why are you taking money in to cast your votes? So they respond me, many of the people responded that, see, in the last 5 years, they looted us, therefore we are looting them right now. These contradictions, how do you look like being an decision maker of the institutions and the people's views? Because when we are talking about democracy, it is about the peoples also. So that is my questions actually. Yeah, thank you.
One to the Commissioner, Mr. What do you think about the independence of the Election Commission as it stands today? But what we see is that there is a collusion, not the independence what we are looking at. Justice Madan Lokur also said that about the appointments of the Election Commission, which commissioners, you see. We saw the same thing when the Congress party was also there, and they also went on appointing additional commissioner instead of three. There were three commissioners were there. So Mr. Session also faced a lot of difficulties at the time. Now, second question to Justice Lokur also about the delays in the judgment that happens in the courts, high courts or maybe other courts. So you mentioned 2 points about a chief minister and his family indulging into a lot of money laundering and money the corruption. And secondly, you mentioned Maharashtra also about the decision of the speaker, which went on laying the also, and that benefited a party, definitely party. Now, what is the remedy to this kind of delays in the courts? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions and for the comments on the book. Let me make it a little clear at the beginning. While the purpose of the book was not focused so much on India, but very much focused at the macro level, I have referred to Indian experiences, some of them good, some of them bad, and how these Indian experiences can be useful, but at the same time, the need to bring changes not only in India, almost in every democratic country. Madam Sarangi mentioned about the difference between violence of anarchy and violence of tyranny. Well, the book in which I read this, he goes to explain violence of anarchy is between tribal people or communities, different communities fighting amongst themselves power for power. Violence of tyranny is the one who is in power, showing off his power and effectively misusing the power. So it is, as far as violence of anarchy is concerned, it is within the society. Violence of tyranny is from the ruler, whoever becomes the head of the tribe or head of the community. And later on, of course, it is this conflict between anarchy and violence of anarchy and violence of tyranny that brought about some realization of having a government. So this is at the beginning of the evolution of the government. This was the condition that was there. 1 minute, let me take my specs. Democratic combativeness. Well, what I meant by that was that there should be an aggressive approach to usher in democratic spirit. Unfortunately, what's happening in whether it is an election commission or any rule of the government, then, as you said, the need to consult the citizens, it is not very much there at all. And the combativeness comes in the sense you think that you are superior, one group thinks superior over the other, and it is not, you are not making it participatory. That's the idea I'm trying to convey there. And you said citizen-centric, is it, as far as the election commission is concerned? Why not citizens? It should be election-centric or citizen-centric? Well, unfortunately, over a period of time, the election commissions probably they are so much lost in their work. Although many people think that the election commission doesn't have much of work when the elections are not held. Actually, they have more work when the elections are not held. But be that as it may, the election-centric part of it, I do agree. There could be an advisory board almost at each state level, where the chief electoral officer could consult not only the political parties, but you can have a citizens advisory board or citizen consultancy agency. Unfortunately, we have not developed that. We have not really. But then there are a number of non-governmental organizations making suggestions, and I think the election commissioners also participate in that discussion. And at least Mr. Qureshi is there, I'm sure he'll confirm that. We have we have never hesitated in participating and talking to the people, the challenges faced by the election commission. I'll take the question of appointment first, I think on the question that was raised. I strongly believe that what is in existence is not proper. I feel when you have a collegium consisting either of the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice of India or his nominee, and the opposition leader, I see no reason why judicial representation is not there, should not be there in the selection process. And it seems a little odd because there seems to be inbuilt bias when once you have two persons from the same dispensation to decide. But be that as it may, I thought I would like to make one observation. Probably till this kind of system of collegium system came, normally the Prime Minister used to decide who is the Chief Election Commissioner. Probably, I don't know whether because the opposition parties were not probably as aggressive or as combative as they were not there at that time. The Prime Minister's selection had always been accepted. But in fairness, I must say, the Prime Minister's decisions by and large have been fair and unquestionable. Not that I am defending myself or my appointment. Actually, my appointment itself was a peculiar thing in the sense I never thought that I was going anywhere near when I was from the finance ministry. But then I was probably tossed up for this. But I'm sure Mr. Qureshi will agree that by and large the appointments were fair. I don't think there was any big question mark. The first election commissioner, the chief election commissioner, Mr. Sukumar Sen, was there for more than 9 years as the chief election commissioner. Nobody raised any finger against him, and his successors was not there. Probably the one-man decision was probably more fair than a collegium, it looks like, in retrospect. But be that as it may, I entirely agree that the selection process has to be more credible than what it is today. The money power, I have suggested some, as you know, the political parties have both legal money as well as illegal money in the elections. It's very obvious, and it's probably the biggest challenge that the Election Commission faces in tackling it. Over a period of time, I think the Election Commission has done a remarkable job in controlling the movement of money during the election time and so on. But still, there is cash payment for the voters, and they are done in a very, what should I say, ingenious manner. You know, for example, the first time when it was introduced in Tamil Nadu, in a place called Tirumangalam, the money used to be kept along with the newspaper and given to the people in the doorsteps. So you can't really, go against them in the court and get it convicted. It's impossible. So the human ingenuity being what it is, I don't think we have to. That's where I have said that apart from this aspect, the corporate donations to political parties should stop. That is unfortunately causing tremendous strain, not only for the not only for the people, but also for the corporates themselves. They have expressed many times their difficulties and embarrassments in making contribution under compulsion to the ruling party as well as the opposition parties. So that's where I have given a suggestion. Of course, I'm not saying that it is a perfect suggestion. There can be debate on that. All that I am saying is, do not allow this nexus between corporates and political parties. Have a national election fund. Use it for conducting the election. And for example, in Canada, nobody is allowed to give donation to political parties except the members and their families, the political party members. So I think it's a very easy reform that can be brought about. Bring about some measure by which the money power has control. Or the best thing is remove all controls. As what they do in America, they have no restrictions. Any amount can be given to any person and make it transparent. But in a country like India, this illegal money is playing havoc. There is no doubt about it. And political parties are not only very happy about the existing state of affairs, they don't want any reform at all. You'll be surprised. In the last so many years of elections, no political party has ever brought an item of electoral reform in their manifesto, except probably the last one where they said mentioned, one of the parties has mentioned about one nation, one poll. But we have addressed number of recommendations to the government of India. And I accuse all the parties. In fact, one of the things I want to say about my book is, well, I'm not criticizing any individual or any political party. I accuse all political parties in India that they are not fair to the citizens of this country. They have not taken initiative for the electoral reforms, and it is necessary and urgently necessary rather that some kind of an action is taken. Although number of non-governmental bodies have been mentioning, the Election Commission has been mentioning, the Law Commission has been recommending, but it seems that all the reforms have come only with the blessings of the Supreme Court. Otherwise, no initiative has been taken. The simple thing as a law for political parties, which we have been recommending, the Commission has recommended, the Venkatachaliah Commission recommended, but it seems to be lying uncared. I see no reason why we should not have a law on political parties. So anyhow, as far as the money point is concerned, is one of the items, and the accounting of the political parties, accounting system followed. There must be standardization, and it is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, this kind of status quo, the political parties will be very happy to continue, and you will only find more and more complaints and more deterioration of democracy. Election Tribunal, Mr. Hardyal Singh mentioned about the need for a quicker pace in disposal of cases. You know, in Brazil, we have a system where the Election Tribunal, as it is called, is presided over a judge of the Supreme Court. And the election commissioners are members of the tribunal. And since they have hands-on experience about the election, the judge of the Supreme Court judge sits as a presiding officer and decides the issues. That is the one I had mentioned in my book. And this kind of indifference, the Constitution says, as far as the election petitions are concerned, they must be disposed of as early as possible. And this is something which I am baffled. In a constitution, why should you say as early as possible? We should have said within a time limit, it should have been done. Will you have time limit for so many things? I see no reason why the constitution framers use the word, probably because they had the impression that it was a nascent democracy. Over a period of time, changes should come. But indifference, absolute indifference. Similarly, on the appointment of the election, the impeachment of the removal of the election commissioner, there's an anomaly pending for decades, which has been pointed out to the government. Because the constitution says the chief election commissioner can recommend the removal of an election commissioner. When the multi-member election commission body was formed, they are all equal. He cannot recommend. He is not expected to recommend. But in the earlier situation, when the constitution was framed, was that the election commissioners are supposed to be appointed in each state at the time of the election for a short period. For that purpose, they said, but now what is happening is the chief election commissioner can be removed by an impeachment. Whereas the election commissioners, there is no indication of an impeachment process for them. In my opinion, is again an urgent reform that is called for. There are many, of course, but the most important change I always advocate is the need to change the first past post system. That is where I think the small proliferation of political parties is happening only because of that. Because a person can win with a difference of one vote. And it has a few occasions of very recent they have won. And it is the dominant social group in each constituency decides the candidate. Because with some 20 to 25% of votes polled, they can get it. We should insist preferably 50% plus one vote for each constituency as a representative. If that is not possible, at least 33 and 1/3% for about a period of 10 years, and thereafter move over to 50% plus one. Only then we can really call this as a representative democracy. In my opinion, our democracy, and most of the countries where they follow this system, it is not a representative democracy. If you're concluding, I'll add one more point. If you see what is happening in our country, I have referred to the hatred and violence in many of the countries affecting the quality of democracy. They all quote Mr. Ambedkar for their support. But one observation made by Mr. Ambedkar, they seem to be totally ignoring it. I got that quotation. This must be, I think, printed everywhere, all over the constitutional institutions, and we should, This is what Ambedkar said in his observation. If we wish to maintain democracy, not merely in form, but also in fact, what must we do? The first thing, in my judgment, we must do is to hold fast to the constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. It means we must abandon the bloody methods of revolution. These are the golden words of Mr. Ambedkar, but no political party has ever subscribed to this. If only follow the constitutional methods, and thereby I mean the rule of law, I think the quality of democracy in India would have improved. But unfortunately, we are not improving, we are only deteriorating.
There was a question directed to
Okay, your question was actually in two parts. One was about the chief minister who was giving contracts. It's an allegation. I'm not accusing the chief minister of, but it has been coming in the newspapers over the last couple of days. The second thing that you had asked was about delays. How do we get rid of delays? There are several ways of doing it, but I think if it boils down to the political will. If the government says that we have to do something about it, and the judiciary says we have to do something about it, both of them must have the political will. I think the problem can be solved. But as long as they don't have that, will, either the judiciary or the government, it'll just go on like that.
There is one question which I wanted to ask Sri Krishna Murthy. You see, you mentioned that in order to deal with the complaint of missing voters' names, India could adopt the New Zealand practice of allowing voters with necessary citizenship identity and proof of residence to vote in a separate ballot box.
The name is not in the register.
Yeah. Could you elaborate on how that is done?
Well, in New Zealand, if there are people whose names are not in the voter register but who thinks that is a eligible voter, they are allowed to vote separately in a separate box, and all these votes are pooled into one basket. When the election counting takes place, if the margin of difference between the winner and the loser is more than the number of votes polled in the separate box, they are ignored. But if the margin of difference between the winner and the loser is less than the number of votes polled in this separate box, then they take up these votes polled in the separate box, verify, and satisfy whether they are genuine voters or not. But that gives at least some kind of a confidence in the citizens' minds of the citizens that they are not ignored. So this could be considered. I know there are practical difficulties implementing this in a country like India, but then we have to pay a price for that. We should bring about so that the credibility of the electoral system is established and the people have faith in the system, because over a period of time, the electors seem to be losing some kind of a confidence, which I feel is unjustified. But even so, it is our duty, the government and the election commission, to go out of the way to convince the people that the credibility of the system will be established and the process of consultation will be established, and then explain our difficulties and how changes could be brought about. But there is an impression, there is no doubt many electors think that the electoral system management has deteriorated over a period of time. So I am not convinced about it, honestly, but I think it is our duty to convince the citizens that it has not deteriorated.
Sir,
I thought, SIR being the hot topic of the day. I don't know whether Mr. Qureshi would like to say something on that, but I strongly believe that the Constitution and the Representation of People Act clearly gives an authority to the Election Commission to decide the time of SIR, so that is intensive revision of the voter roll. In fact, in the recent argument before the Supreme Court, I heard Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi was arguing against the power of the Election Commission to have this special intensive revision, and he was quoting the legal provisions in the Article 324, 327, and so on. He was of the opinion that the power given under the Representation of People's Act is derived from the Article 324, but whereas the rules prescribed by the Representation of People Act does not give them the authority to ask for certain questions which are being asked now. That is one point which, but my view is that when the Election Commission has been given the full freedom, the exclusive constitutional freedom to conduct free and fair elections, and when the Representation of People's Act gives the choice to the Election Commission to decide, it is certainly the right of the Election Commission to revise the electoral roll. But the question is the timing of the SIR. This is being also asked question that just before the elections, why do you do that? Why not do it before? But I think somebody answered this question. For UP, they were trying to do it. People are asking, why are you doing the revision now so early? So there can be different views on that. But here again, the question about whether the Election Commission can go into the citizenship or not, my view is that Election Commission has no authority to go into the citizenship of each individual voter. But if there is a complaint against a voter not being a citizen, the Election Commission cannot ignore the complaint. It has to verify the authenticity of the genuineness of the complaint. So the primary responsibility for preparing the citizenship identity is with the government. So, but the secondary responsibility under the electoral laws is an election. If there is for example, 10 people come and complain that there are 10 or 15 people are not citizens, they are being enrolled in the voter roll. Election Commission cannot sit idle or throw up his hands in despair. They have to verify. So it is a secondary responsibility, but it is not a primary responsibility. So voter register is a very important document. The purity of voter register is also very important for the purity of the election process. And you cannot question that the election commission has no authority to conduct such revision. The question is about timing. Yes, there can be a sufficient time period. And if necessary, I have said publicly in a TV interview, if necessary, you can even postpone the elections by a few days or by a month, if necessary. And this is what Supreme Court seems to have observed in a day or two before, that you postpone the election if necessary, but give them time. So this can be reasonably and easily solved. But you do not question the right of the Election Commission to purify the electoral roll. Thank you. Like that? No, why not? I think the more the better.
I would only say, sir, that I know your views, and you're one of the best CECs we ever had. You're a man of integrity, man of conviction. And if I had written this book, I would have written exactly the same thing. But only I have a question for you, sir, because we have been talking of a SIR. That last SIR in Bihar was 2003, and then a decision was taken that in future there is no need for intensive revision because already the rolls are digitized, and all we need to do is summary revision that will go door to door every year and see whether there is any change which has happened in the last 1 year. So since you were the person in the Election Commission in 2003 and 4, both these decisions to go for intensive roll in 2003 and the decision not to do it in future, so can you elaborate on that?
In fact, I am surprised why the Election Commission did not conduct the quinquennial revision of the electoral roll. The earlier instruction was once in 5 years they are supposed to go door-to-door verification is supposed to be done. But I don't know, maybe for valid reasons, I can't sit in judgment, but they should have revised, if not in 5 years or at least 6 years. There must be a periodical revision by door-to-door verification. Even in door-to-door verification, sometimes mistakes creep in. For example, when I was the Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Adi Godrej's name was not there. He made a public statement. My name has been ignored by the Election Commission. I went into the whole issue, why his name was excluded. You will be surprised. The form signed by the family members did not include his name. Then I made a public statement. I also talked to him and told him, I'm sorry, the mistake lies at your doors. Similarly, mistakes are there in the electoral roll. There is no doubt about it. It's a river, it's a stream, because every point of time there is a change. Somebody gets into the register, somebody gets out of the register. So, in my opinion, there must be a periodical revision of voter register. It cannot be abandoned for whatever the reason. Maybe it can be postponed. For example, during the COVID time, you couldn't have done it. That's okay, that's fair enough. But you must do it at least periodically and give reasons why it has not been periodically revised.
Just a slight modification to what Mr. Krishna Murthy said. Yes, there should be a periodic revision, and periodic revision is happening every year. And as per decision of 2004, your time, sir, that in future, now that we have a digitized roll already, in this case, what is special intensive revision? The digitized roll which we have prepared in 30 years. It has taken us 30 years to reach a 98-90% success. It is thrown into the dustbin. We'll start afresh. Now, that is where I say that do they have a magic wand that what took us 30 years or 25 years, they will do it in 30 days? So, what is summary revision? We already have a digitized roll with which 2024 election was held and the government is sitting in New Delhi. All that we do every January, we go to door to door, it's the same thing that you were saying, that we go door to door, look at the existing rolls, this is the situation that in your house there are 4 voters, is that correct? If not, is there any change? If somebody had died, please let us know. There is a form 7, we delete. Or if there is an addition, somebody has come in as a bride or somebody has become 18, form 6, we apply. Or if any correction is required, that is done. And in this case, what is happening in one house, 68 or 100 people in a 10 by 10 house. How come has this been allowed after this special intensive revision? Now, we had there's a very common childish thing that the computer is smart enough. If there is a house which shows more than 10 voters, automatically it gets flagged. Okay, go and see, there must be something wrong. And surely there is something wrong. 300 people living in one bedroom house. And after this intensive revision, what have we achieved? And in any case, after what happened in Bihar, to find that foreigners there, they haven't come out with the figures, but we have been getting only from what they have submitted to the court or here or there, that only 300 or 500 people have been found who are foreigners. Only 150 of them are Bangladeshi, the rest are Nepali women who got married into Bihar. Now, for that, 850 crore, 8 crores people were made to run around like mad, and the kind of pressure and pressure on the BLO to upload within 30 days. How can you upload 150 forms in a day? I request all of you to try doing it, to pick up any document and try and upload on your phone. How many can you do in a day? 10, 20, 30, 150, which is why they are dying, which is why they are committing suicide, and which is where, sir, I come to the judiciary. Even one suicide or one such death should have shaken up the judiciary. And for them, these are only numbers. Oh, only 30. Is a big, India has a big population, 30, 40 people dying doesn't really matter. So who are they trying to protect? Somebody's ego. And the guy, the gentleman, sir, although I should say it's very awkward to be commenting on the successor, because these people are smarter than we were. They say that if somebody has complained, he should give an affidavit. Leader of opposition is being asked, shoutingly in a press conference, he should give an affidavit. What is the implication? If the affidavit is wrong, he is criminally liable. What if he turns around and he says, all right, I give an affidavit. You also give me an affidavit that the new rule which you have published are totally mistake-free. If there is one mistake, you are criminally liable. Millions of people have been left out. And how many complaints we got that 50% of the voters, they did not even sign the form because the BLU is under pressure. He started uploading without getting his signature. People went to him and said, no, it's already done. And what about my mother? I've already signed for her, for you, for everybody. So if that is what it is, for this kind of a fraud with the help of the judiciary, that is absolutely the...
One second. I'm not supporting this. So don't look at me.
Sir, yeah. We all are concerned about democracy. We are talking about election. What about internal democracy within the party? Until we have a internal democracy party, it will not flourish. Second thing is about digital. Can we have an online election by online, maybe computer or mobile or something like that? Because most of the people are migrating. Can they put their vote in electronic way? The third thing is about equal vote. Can you say that Ambani Adani vote is equal to a common man?
Democracy within the party, I have discussed it in the book. There must be not only democracy but also rotation of posts. Nobody should be, in my opinion, nobody should hold any post in any party for more than 2 terms. But that is not practiced. In fact, one party leader made himself a life president, and the election commission reprimanded and imposed a penalty in Maharashtra. So there must be democracy within the party, periodical elections, periodical inspection, periodical audit should be there. You said about using the mobile phones for voting. No, that's, I think it's not fair and not possible at all, because a lot of complaints that the voting is influenced when the people vote on the internet. Though at least for senior citizens and handicapped people and service officers, we should introduce, in my opinion, internet voting. Have you had something? Yeah. Last question. This is the last question. Yeah. Let's just pick up.
My name is Sachi Chaudhary. issues. One is, of course, the importance of the expenditure observers report. Till the time that, I had occasion to be an expenditure observer in several parliamentary and assembly constituencies. Till that time, I don't know if the position has changed later. It would be used only if a candidate in an election petition raised the issue. Otherwise, it would gather dust in the portals of the Election Commission. That is whether the position has changed, and what are your views on that?
So as far as the reports of the election observers are concerned, election observers' reports are concerned, they are periodically examined. If there are any important points suggested in the election observers' report, they are taken note of. At least that is my understanding.
That's a different issue, but in a particular instance, unless the opposition candidate or the losing candidate raises the issue, the report is not considered.
You mean to say that there is a violation which has not been taken note of by the Election Commission unless and until it is brought to the notice only by the...
As the matter used to stand.
Well, I am not able to give you a straight answer because normally they should take note of it and find out. But if in a particular instance it has not been done, probably it is irregular.
I've also been out of the system for quite some time. The second thing is about assisted living. More and more people, elderly people, are now moving into assisted living facilities. They may have been very active public servants themselves, otherwise activists. So how are they brought into this thing while revision is concerned?
Well, as far as registration of the voter is concerned, it is based on the principle of residence in India.
Okay.
So if a particular person lives in that locality, it is the duty of the person to ensure that the name is there. But if at the time of the revision, the Election Commission can certainly take note of the person who is, suppose the name is not there, can have it included by using the proper form, etc. Now, digitally you can upload your application for registration. So, assisted living, there is no separate exercise as far as registration is concerned. As far as voting is concerned, now I think over 80 years of people, they now take the ballot box to the residence of the people and then get the vote registered.
But there's another problem on people below 80. I face that problem myself. I have I have serious orthopedic issues. Since I'm nowhere near 80, when in the last general elections I had requested that something to be done so that I could cast my vote at this thing, because a lot of people in my complex were doing so. I mean, who were clearly above 80. And I in fact wrote to the present Chief Election Commissioner myself. Got no response. They said, you don't have a disability certificate. So unless you have a disability certificate, but I'm as good as disabled, as you know, personally.
Well, I don't know, but I think as far as an individual case is concerned, I suppose that has to be decided on a one-to-one basis. I don't think it can
make some sort of reform on that.
I would say the case is rare, there is no need for a change in the system, but certainly deal with the individual grievance and get it satisfied. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll have to now close. It's been a very interesting and thought-provoking discussion, and after all, it's a work in progress, because a lot of anomalies have come in, as both Sri Krishna Murthy and Qureshi Saab said. So they have to, after all, it's a people's democracy. So until the peoples do something, I'm not saying that we have to come on the streets, but whatever. So things won't improve. So anyway, thanks to all of you for joining in, and thanks. Okay.